going to record. So, hi everyone. So I am Hannah, and I'm one of the ambassador advisors for the PAD project. So the PAD project is an organisation that helps end period shame and poverty around the world and empowers girls and all menstruators globally. So I started last year as an ambassador, and then this year as an ambassador advisor. And we currently have 29 countries around the world that have people working in them, trying to help period poverty around, like, in those countries. The PAD project was set up, and you may have seen the film. I don't know whether that's been shown to you. If not, you should watch it. It's called Period End of Sentence. And so the PAD project run projects around, like, in different countries, and they have pad machines where they empower women to work on pad machines and make pad machines and give them the tools and resources to become financially independent. And they also run washable pad programs as well, so make reusable pads as well. Okay, so we've got a few questions. So we'll start with Elaine. So why are programs like this needed around the world and where you live?
Because for me, Hannah, firstly, I felt empowered just by becoming an ambassador of the PAD project and knowing that I am part of this movement that's trying to really combat period poverty, create menstrual equity. That in itself is just such an empowering feeling and thought, and it's just amazing. But it is more needed, I believe, because menstruators are really struggling. In the area where I work, it's a real challenge. The menstruators in the schools where I particularly work, there's no such thing as free menstrual products, or the school can provide, or the families can provide. So that is why we have to get on board, we the ambassadors and our families and friends and our connections and networks that see or can identify this problem. That is why this movement is so important. But even so, just knowing that you're not working in isolation, that you are part of, as I said, this movement is just such an empowering force that just drives you to push to make sure that where every area that you can touch, you try and make sure that menstrual or period poverty is combated.
Okay. Fiona, do you want to go?
Well, I think it's really important because before I started finding out about all of this, I really wasn't aware of it. After I started looking into it, after joining the ambassador program, I started my own pad drive, and I was really surprised to see how involved people got in my school, especially the teachers. There was one teacher who bought $300 worth of pads for the drive, and the amount of support and the amount of awareness that was spread just within our school and even outside of our school community was amazing. So I think if there are more programs like this, it would be much easier and better to spread awareness. And because I don't think it's an issue that is widely talked about because of the stigma surrounding menstruation, I think it is important to break this and break the stereotypes to spread the message of menstrual equity and combating period poverty.
Brilliant. Ayushi?
Being a part of this program has really changed a lot of things for me. And just observing how things move so quickly, and it's so nice to see that we belong from such different spaces and we can relate on the same ground, that no matter where we come from, no matter where we live, what economic background we come from, the stigma stays. And till date, even after so much of education and the biology textbook talking about it so commonly, I still remember that most days I was hiding my pad, thinking that, it was something not to be proud of. But today, just being part of this ambassador program, I can say to people that I'm working for menstrual equity all across globe, and I'm representing people from all genders. And it's so nice to be a part of something so amazing and such a movement which is accessible and accepting on every grounds. And where, in the start I did not even know that, not every woman is a menstruator, and not every menstruator is a woman. So getting this idea and being gender inclusive and being inclusive to all those sections of the society, pad project is like changing people's life, and to be a part of something is just amazing. Like, it has impacted me as a person, and to the friends and family around, how I can freely talk about it, saying that, I'm a part of an ambassador program. And what is it about? It's about periods, and it's okay, and it's not something bad, and it's not something I'm ashamed of, and I'm a very proud menstruator. So this amazing program is changing the world.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Afima, what about you?
Yes, so the past project program has been quite, will I say, it has opened my mind to a lot of things that I never thought about periods. When I found out about period stigma, and I thought it was a new thing until I started my own social initiative and I realized that it was actually a universe of advocates that are focused on tackling period stigma and reducing period poverty and achieving menstrual equity for people. I never knew that there was actually a live and thriving advocacy agenda to, to increase investment in menstrual health and hygiene. And this part project program has made the learning and the advocacy journey more focused for me because when I started my social initiative, I started learning about educating myself about period poverty, period stigma. It felt like a solo activity, despite the universe of different advocates. But being in this group of persons that have one goal in mind, which is to achieve mental equity for their circle of influence, has helped me really connect my contribution to the expected impact. And I would say that when we had a session on menstrual equity for disabled people, I think that was the session that really touched me because I'd never had never crossed my mind how people with disability experience their period. It had never, crossed my mind, and I think that is something that I'm going to take away from this. And also, girls that experience things like, natural disasters, like what happened in Haiti, and girls that are refugees. In these two areas is something that the past project has really brought to the limelight for me, and going forward is something that I am really passionate about because it helps you focus your impact.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on so many of those points. It's very similar for me as well from what you just said. Yeah. Okay. And Avon, what about you?
I think these sort of programs are really important uh, in our local contexts as well as in an international context, because first of all, we might think that countries that are poorer economically, or countries that we refer to as third world countries, are the countries that suffer from issues in the context of unequal access to menstrual hygiene products, or struggles with menstrual hygiene itself, and taboo around menstrual products and menstrual cycles and hygiene. But it is in fact a global problem, and it exists everywhere. And when we have programs like these, then we get to talk to and interact with people from all over the world, and we realize the extent of the issue, And through collaborative efforts, we can also come up with solutions, even if it's in just our local contexts, when so many people are collaborating together and working in their capacity in their geographical locations. It makes a difference. And you also understand what the local or the regional contexts around certain menstrual taboos are. And when you discuss it with other people, you realize that the contexts may vary, but the solutions may be the same. And when you interact with people from like all over the world, there are also so many more solutions that you can get access to, that you can apply in your local context and solve a lot of the issues around inequality in access, or like problems around schooling that young girls have to face to when it comes to menstrual inequity, etc. Like a lot of these different problems are there. And even though the issues might not be exactly the same, they can be similar in nature. Like, for example, menstrual taboo exists in different forms in almost all countries in the world. The scale might vary, the nature might vary, but it still exists. And the proof of it is in the multiple conversations that we have had amongst ourselves, where we related to each other whenever we talked about this. And in our individual capacities, we have tried to fight against it. Like, for example, maybe if I am to give a personal example, not taking the period products that I'm using in like a covered black sort of plastic bag, and choosing to take it as it is. So in our individual capacities, we do what we can. But if such a program is there, then there's more scope for collaboration. There's more scope for sharing of knowledge and learning. And I think that can lead to bigger impacts and bigger changes.
I completely agree. I think absolutely. I think there's been, for me, I think there's being involved in the PAD project has opened my eyes to so much about not just about period poverty around the world, or like lack of access to products, and like the inequalities of like menstrual everything. But also it's also highlighted that so many things about periods that I didn't know. And as a 30-something-year-old woman, I should have known a lot more about my body than what I did 2 years ago. And it's been really interesting. And now it's like I have changed some of the language that I use when I talk about like different parts of my body. And I will, and like, there's just honestly, there's so much where I'm like, oh, did you know this? And also, I didn't realize like what was actually in like tampons until I started on this. And so now I will not use like tampons that have plastic in if I can help it, because there's just ridiculous amounts of stuff in different things.
Yeah.
And there's so much that I've learned through this project, but also it's been really nice to like what I think a few people have said here is that actually everyone has had similar experiences, whether it's like the education around periods and the lack of education around periods, the fact that like you're told the really basic things relating to it and then that's it, or if you're told anything at all. And yeah, I think it's big. So for me, I think it's really interesting that actually it doesn't matter where you are in the world, we're all kind of connected in by
Yeah.
the same thing. So what's next question? So we'll stay with that order. So what are you doing to facilitate menstrual equity, and how has it impacted in the lives of the menstruators you support? So that could be in your community, or it could be people, your friends, or anything.
So for me, what started out for me is just really giving a pack of toiletries to schoolgirls at my local school. Became I identified a greater need. So for me, it became a matter of, if you don't have pads, because there was a lack of pads that we identified in the school, it went further to say, how do you wash? What do you use to wash? If you are menstruating, do you have soap? Do you have a face cloth or cloth to wash? And it went further, do you even have toothpaste and a toothbrush? So it's what started out as a little pack of of pads has now become a complete toiletry pack that we distribute on a monthly basis, so that the entire hygiene needs or is really taken care of for this particular menstruator for that month. And because I realized that education, menstrual health, as well as mental health for me is really interconnected, because if you don't have pads, you can't concentrate in school. You are just completely off. That's besides the fact that your body is off during that time of the month anyway. But the stress of not having, the lack of not having is just added stress that no menstruator should go through. So for me, I would honestly believe that over the past 4 years, we have comprehensively looked at the girls' entire needs, from menstrual health to education to mental health. And we, with the ones that we do work with, we really try to assist them in those three spheres of their lives. In terms of my friends and my family, by me becoming more educated about menstrual inequality, I would like to believe that it has become a little bit of a contagious thing amongst my group of friends and my family, because they are now contributing to this movement. They are donating their resources and really trying as much as possible to help. So in addition to the menstruators that we are helping, we now find that educators in the school are from their own pockets purchasing sanitary pads. Like I said, my group of friends that I have are donating to these various girls, and it's just blowing my mind. I've made so many friends within the PAID project, like people that are just contributing to my knowledge and sharing ideas of things that I can apply in South Africa. I mean, from India, if I think about it, it's really just incredible that the impact that this has made. So for me, it's not just an impact in my community that I've been able to make through the knowledge that I've gained from this movement, but the fact that people from around the world are contributing to my knowledge and the things that I'm doing, that's just incredible.
Well, so far, if I were to talk on a big scale, like things like PAD projects, just basically, things like PAD drives, and basically just spreading awareness, I think that is impacting a lot of people's lives. It is making people think about, people are actually struggling, because the people around me are pretty privileged. So I don't think anyone has actually stopped and thought, oh, people don't have necessities in other parts, or in other parts of the world, or even within our community. I also think that on like a smaller scale, even within like my friend group with my friends, we've talked a lot about the education around menstruation, education about just hygiene in general that is provided in school. And we realized that we had to figure it out ourselves as like 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls. We didn't have the resources or the education to provide us with the knowledge that we had to have to safely deal with all of that. So I think talking about it, spreading awareness is helping, especially like younger girls, younger menstruators. I also do think that it's like personally, I didn't really realize the whole aspect of it either. I didn't realize that it did affect richer countries, first world countries, more developed countries. I thought it was just an issue of more underdeveloped countries. But then I realized that even within richer countries, countries that have higher GDPs, there are communities that are struggling. So yeah, I do think it's impacted a lot of people.
Yeah.
So to talk about how I began with impacting people, I cannot say like other counterparts have made a huge impact or impacting anybody globally, but I started with young kids in my family, two of my nephews, one 8 and one 11. And we streamed the documentary made by PAD Project. It was amazing. It was absolutely incredible to see those young kids get engaged in the documentary and feel that it's normal. And one of the kid pointed out how he knows that every month, his mother menstruates, and it's a normal thing. And it was so nice to see them get involved. And I know that me educating just two kids is not just them. They'll go out, they talk in groups, and they'll talk how it's not a girl's problem, or it's not a gendered problem, and it's not a problem at all, and how we need to be inclusive from a very young age so that we rule out that stigma. Because if I get a cut in my hand, a bandage would not be something I'd be very ashamed to ask for. But there have been so many instances that girls were taking so much time, or menstruators were taking so much time in just to ask or sneak a pad in the washrooms. It was not at all something that anybody was supposed to go. After a lot of discussion in our group about the documentary and how the PAD project has impacted and the entire globe today, I made an initiative by sending out the links of the documentary in one of the groups. That is my council group. I was a part of my students' council. And it was really nice to see how each and every single kid was interacting. And it was, I know that, every single kid is a part of the council and they get to speak on a daily basis. They take the stage and they address about a lot of aspects. And a lot of them went to the school and talked about this, of how even a 30-minute documentary has changed the lives of so many people. And it's it's interesting to know that every time we had a very private meeting in the school where we were getting educated about periods, every guy knew what was going on, but they were not included. So that stigma begins when we start excluding a certain group and making it about certain someone. So even if we are talking about it, even or if I feel that even on a personal scale, what I learned from PAD project every day about hygiene, or as Aline was saying, as mental health, how it impacts my anxiety, impacts my periods. So even if I'm talking to one single person, they would talk to more people, and it's spreading. And it is something that we are in it together, and it's not going to stop. And we may have a backdrop for a really, really, really long time, but now is the time where we can be proud menstruators in this global community.
I really love the fact that you have shared it with your nephews and that they had that reaction though, because I think if you can change like a period for, like, for example, you can change a period for one person for that 1 month, then that's a good thing. But actually, by showing your nephews at such a young age, what you've done is you've showed them that this is normal, and they're never going to grow up. They're not going to get older and think, oh, this is disgusting. They're going to always be like, actually, you know what, this is just normal, this happens. And they'll grow up, and that will influence, like in the future, that will influence their children and the way that they behave, or like, and I just think it's so powerful. And I think maybe we talk about like education, because I think a few people have touched on that in a minute. But I think it's very much like boys aren't taught anything about like periods, and I think that is what you've said, it builds, that's where the stigmas start. But I think if we're all happy, we'll have a chat about that in a minute. Okay, so Afima, what about you? So what are you doing to facilitate menstrual equity and the impact and improve the lives of people in your community or people that you know?
So it's already been around, first of all, bringing awareness that period stigma exists. Because I think it was until I started, you know, sharing about it, a lot of people went even aware that they suffered period stigma. They don't felt they had normalized it because they felt it's a taboo topic. Periods have to be period is a taboo topic. Period products are things to be eaten, not freely taken to the grocery counter and filled. It's not something you know, you know, confidently just place on the countertop and tell them that they have to do it for you. It was until I started, you know, sharing content about fear stigma, sharing statistics about fear stigma, and also sharing that there is a lack of statistics of fear stigma in Africa. There's a lot of statistics of fear stigma in the UK, in the developed world, but there's not a lot of fear of data of girls that have experienced fear stigma in Africa. And that is one thing that I have that I'm trying to do, you know, calling on researchers, field workers that can help with gathering this data that will actually help policymakers invest. Because when policymakers have the data that these are the people suffering fear stigma or do not have menstrual problems, or even the sanitary facilities to even or toilets to even go and change when they need to in schools or public places, that is when they can invest in menstrual health organizations. So that is what I've been trying to do through my platform of sharing awareness about what breast stigma is, sharing awareness that there's a lack of data in Africa for how many girls in school because they're not able to experience their period, you know, with dignity, and then also share data on statistics to see the statistics that we have. Kenya has done a lot. Kenya in East Africa has done a lot when it comes to eradicating period poverty and period stigma. And they have support from the United Nations, United Nations Women, and a lot of organizations. In Nigeria, there's a lack of data. So
Yeah.
that is what I've been trying to do, really bringing an awareness of peer stigma, bringing an awareness of the lack of data, and also bringing an awareness of the need to invest in mental health and care, and also connecting it to the Sustainable Development Goal 5 of gender equality, that when we achieve it, we're able to achieve the SDG goals and also, you know, bring the whole world closer to achieving menstrual equity.
Thank you. Eamon, what about you?
So, menstrual hygiene and menstrual equity is something I'm really passionate about, but not engaged in a professional capacity, as a lot of the PAD project ambassadors and advisors are. They've done incredible stuff around opening organizations and reducing inequality and all of that, and that's really great. My sphere of influence is much smaller and it includes me and my family, which has my mom and my sister and my friends. So we talk about it a lot. We talk about it very openly, and we have made sure. I have made sure that whenever we have these conversations, there's nothing that is something that should be taboo or something that we cannot touch upon, no matter how weird. Even with my friends, I try to be as open as possible, and I keep an open door so that they can come to me if they feel like there's something that they're hesitant to talk about, but they need someone to share it with. I can give an example. I recently started using the menstrual cup, and I just started a conversation with my friends around it. And so the idea is not to shame people into using different products, or so menstrual cups are more environmentally friendly, but the focus is on the comfort of the menstruator and what they feel comfortable. Everybody's bodies are not the same, so they need different products, and that is the priority. So, but we should know what is out there. We should have that understanding, so that we are able to choose for ourselves. So when I started using menstrual cups, I did not have anyone to ask, and because of that reason, it took me a lot of time to get on them, because I had to read, and reading is great, but if someone has that experience, then it's an entirely different thing. It becomes much more easier to understand the pros and cons of the product, etc. So when I started using it, I thought, why not have this conversation with my friends, so that they get to know from someone who has experience using it, and they can make that choice for themselves whether they want to go forward with the product or not. And in fact, one of my friends did want to try it, and they were also hesitating because they did not have anyone to talk to. And after that conversation, now they're actually considering switching to the menstrual cup if they can find that their body can get accustomed to it, or if they're comfortable with it. So yeah, I feel like even if you're not engaged with it in a professional capacity, or the scale of our activity is not very big, we can always try to have these conversations with people that are there in our lives, our families, our friends. If we are teachers, educators, then our students, our colleagues. So I do not think this topic is something that needs to happen only if you know the person very well, or if you're only, like, say, out there working on this topic. It should be something that you're talking about, discussing with everyone, and that is what will lead to a more open culture around this, and to decrease in the taboo, as well as on a larger level, more awareness around the issues, and then coming up with solutions on, like, a national level or an international.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so I'm pretty similar. So my I've done a couple of pad drives and done, but mine's mainly awareness and breaking down the stigmas. So I do a lot of sharing on social media about different things. I also talk a lot about periods just in general life, like pretty much every day. To the point there's a bit of a joke in my family that I talk too much about periods now. And but I think it's really important. I think one way that you can like stop the shame or stop the stigmas from building up is by being open about it. So I live in the UK, and I think a lot of people, even some people in the UK, are like, "Oh, period poverty doesn't exist in here. Everyone can afford period products." Actually, that's not true, and it's been like exacerbated by COVID. So COVID has like made it so much more difficult. So there was a study done, and it went up from 1 in 10 girls under 21 not being able to afford period products to over like lockdowns and COVID, it went up to 3 in 10 people, like 3 in 10 people not being able to afford it. Like that is a massive amount of people not being able to afford products every month. And I think there's at the moment, like, living costs are going up in the UK, but the wage costs aren't. And there's a lot more families who are struggling, and there's a lot of people that are having to choose between either food or period products that month. And so I think the more that things like this are spoken about, whether it's just like in like my immediate local community or like nationally, I think that's a really good thing. So anything I think that anyone's doing to ease like a period for one, like even if it's for a month for one person, or breaking down some of those stigmas, I think that's only a good thing. Can I know, like, I just wondered if we could just have a little of a show of hands, because while we were talking, there was a couple of things that I thought about. So I read somewhere the other day about that we shouldn't be expected to take our bags to the toilet with us just to stop people from feeling like shamed in seeing our period products, or like, so I was told at school that like if you didn't have a bag with you and you needed to go to the toilet with your period product, to put it up your sleeve. So I was just wondering, let's have a show of hands, who here has ever hidden their period product when going to the toilet, or has felt shame or stigma around their period? So all of us. And so we are we're in quite a few countries here, so everyone has felt shame and stigma around this. And so I have made a vow to myself that I will never do that again. I will always be like, yes, like maybe not waving it above my head, being like, "Woo, I'm on my period," but I definitely will never stick a period product up my sleeve again. And I know that we touched about on education. So I wondered whether anyone wanted to like just talk a little bit about what their education was when it came to periods.
None. None. No education whatsoever. I got my first period and I was horrified. I remember going to school the next day and all I could think about was this thing sticking out at the back of my skirt. Like, I felt so uncomfortable. In my mind, I could just see this bulge at the back of my skirt and I thought everybody could see. I kept on asking my friends if my skirt was dirty. It was just it was a horrible experience. Nobody should ever have to go through that. That's not what I want for my daughter. It was just horrible. No education, no nothing. You don't know what's happening to your body and you're just supposed to figure it out as you go. You don't know why you're getting cramps. It was just horrible.
And that would have been really scary as well, I can imagine, if you had no
It,
education about it.
it was horrendous. I don't even want to think about it because for me, no menstruator should ever have to go through that. Not knowing, I think it was the not knowing what is happening. You're getting this pain out of the blue. It feels like you can't walk, you want to vomit, you have diarrhea. It was just horrible, horrible, horrible.
Does anyone else want to?
Can I go?
Yeah.
So we were in fourth grade and we were giving an exam, and it's a very personal experience. And she was a very close friend of mine, and she started bleeding, and we all thought, no offense to anybody, but we were young and we all thought she was gonna die because she started bleeding, and we got so scared. And we were in fourth grade, and she had to miss her exam, and she was so the thing was so stigmatized, and we were made to feel so bad about it that she didn't show up for a week. And I was amongst those people who had their periods early. And to most of us, it felt that we die. Like initially, I did not even know that the extra flaps of my pad was supposed to go behind, and they used to stick, and it just wasn't supposed to be a very uncomfortable thing. And it wasn't until next 4 years that we had in a biology textbook how people get pregnant and how period is so important for anybody for the entire process of reproduction, that we realize that, oh my god, this is not something bad. And why even and it's sad actually that even after that day when we studied about it, it still continued. It still was that thing that we weren't supposed to talk about in public, and hush hush. And every time we were whispering, the boys knew. And we knew why they were laughing, but nobody could acknowledge it. And trust me, the biology textbook only had one line, that women menstruate. And this is a textbook issued by like the government of India. And it was years later that I got into PAD project and I realized that no, it's not just women, there are people from other gender and we need to be inclusive. So what Eileen is talking about, it being a horrible experience, I can totally relate. And how most of us, the first time, it was the most scary thing that has ever happened, because nothing made sense, not even our mood. So, and it continued for a while, and it wasn't a phase, for a really long time. I believe that it's just a 1 year thing or a 2 year thing, but it never stopped. And now today I am a proud menstruator and I don't want it to stop. But back then I really, really hoped that somebody at that young age had just put up a conversation, like a simple conversation, that it's okay and you're not diseased and you're not going to die somehow. So
That's
it was
a very
lacking.
a very important message. Like, does anyone else want to talk about that? Yes, Fiona?
So this Eileen brought this up about the pad and her feeling like it was sticking out her skirt and like asking her friend to check her skirt and everything. I like when I use the pad, I obviously still feel like that. Like it is uncomfortable to an extent, and there is a level of paranoia. When I first started my period, when I had my first period, I was lucky enough to have had gone to school that taught the girls, like they separated the girls, and in 6th grade they taught us about like menstruation, how to use a tampon, how to use a pad and everything. But it wasn't very in depth. It was just like, oh, this is normal and this is how you use your hygiene products. So I was relatively calm, but something that Ayushi brought up before was like the education of like both genders, like the separation of genders when you talk about like puberty and menstruation. It's not very inclusive. And obviously like I was like obviously because they separate the genders, the boys in the schools, they don't really know what's going on. They know it's a monthly thing because of biology, but they don't know any details. They don't know what actually is going on. They just think, oh, it's part of the reproductive cycle. And even then they don't really understand. So I was having a conversation with one of my close guy friends recently, and I don't remember how this was brought up, but we brought up menstruation, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, why can't you just hold it? And that I've seen men on the internet say things like that. So I thought it was just a funny joke. I didn't realize that kids in my school would be saying that, but he looked me dead in the eyes and he was so serious about it. And I was so in shock. But when I see the generation gap, like this isn't even a generation gap. My younger brother is 3 years younger than me, and he's been asking me questions about menstruation because he has close girlfriends and they talk about it openly without any stigma, or less stigma than I had growing up with about periods. So him asking me about that and him knowing more about periods than the guys in my year group is very interesting.
So interesting because like as like my school was very similar, so we got separated, so boys in one room, girls in another. And yeah, I don't think the boys there were taught absolutely anything about periods whatsoever. And watching like the videos on the internet, like the TikTok videos of people of like girls handing pads to people, like to boys, saying, what is this? How do you think you use it? And they're like, I've got no idea, like trying to figure it out. Like they're quite funny, but at the same time they shouldn't be. Like they should know like what this actually is. Yeah, I think, and like with the checking of skirts as well. So I used to like, my periods used to be really heavy, so I was really paranoid when I was younger. And I remember I was at school and I used to be like, every time I sat down, I'd get up and be like, oh, have I got anything on my skirt? And I always used to ask two friends. I was like, have I got anything on my skirt? Have I got anything on my skirt? And then one day, one of them went, yes. And I was like, yeah, I haven't. I was like, are you joking me? And I turned my skirt around and there was blood everywhere. And it was on my birthday. So I was pretty pleased I got sent home. But at the same time, it was the most mortifying thing that had ever happened. Now I'd be like, oh, just put a jacket around and then just get on with my day. But at the time, I was like, this is terrible. Everyone knows that I'm on my period. And it was the shame of people knowing that I was actually on my period that was worse than having to go home. But yeah.
I think
I actually had my mom tell me about it, but I still it didn't help against the shame. I still had that like I knew about it, but then when I went to school, because the larger world outside still is struggling with the whole thing, the shame and the taboo around periods, I still had to face it. And this whole thing of, is there a red huge mark on my skirt and constantly asking friends and checking in. So yeah, I mean that still happened.
Afema, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think I saw my period when I saw my period. I had a conversation with my mom, and the conversation was not about specifically what I'm going through. It was actually now that you're seeing your period, you're not a woman. If a man should touch you, you're going to get pregnant. That was the conversation. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to be a monthly thing. These are the products. No, that was not the conversation. It was more of you're not a woman, and any boy that just touches you. So that was the fear, and so I had to learn by myself how to. Yeah, she showed me that okay, this is a pad, this is how to place it. But it was more focused on you can get pregnant now, and I had to after like several accidents of being stained in school in junior secondary school, and that was when I learned how to place the pad properly and yeah and use the right product. And at that time, it was always park, and they didn't have the wings, and it was uncomfortable because it was big and huge and stuff like that. And so yeah, so the education for me wasn't about this is something you experience. You definitely have you definitely feel this way cramps. If you go about 3 to 5 days, you sleep every the cycle. I didn't have that education, the frequency of it, the kind of product to use, how I feel bloated or cramps or cramp, cranky. None of that. It was as I evolved through my teenage years that I had to learn even how to count your periods because I think that was really the problem that most young girls had counting their periods and expecting it and preparing for it by having their period products in their school bag and not having to use tissue to stuff yourself until when you get home and then you now have to use the period product. So I don't think it was something that was done well then. Now advocacy groups are available, our project and all the other advocacy groups trying to give people options of different kinds of products they can use, from usable pads to cups or tampons. But then even tampons was seen as taboo because how dare you use tampons? You want to disvirgin yourself? If you use tampons, you're disvirgining yourself. You have to. You are damaged. You're a vile human being if you thought about using tampons. So that education wasn't there and it wasn't available. It looks as if it's better now. Yeah, but yeah, that was my experience.
I think that stigma around tampons is still there. Like if you use them, then you're like, then it's mad. Like
Going to lose your virginity.
yeah, and like and also like thinking back to like at school, we weren't taught how to use tampons, and the diagrams written on the tampon, or like drawn on to the instructions of how to put a tampon in, are just the worst. And like they're just the worst things. Like they always have someone with their leg on the toilet, and you're like, that's the most
Yeah.
uncomfortable position to ever put one in. Like, don't do it that way. But yeah, it's just awful. But yeah.
Definitely. I can so relate with Fina about, for me, it was also you big now. Now you can get pregnant. So if a boy touches you, you're going to get pregnant. So in my mind, I had this thing that I just had to stay away from boys because during this time of the month, I'm definitely going to get pregnant. So it was definitely not about it's a monthly thing. Your body's going to go through this. It was you're big now, you're going to get pregnant.
And that's really scary as well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a really scary thing. Like it's
Yes.
really scary not to know what a period is, but it's also really scary to
Exactly.
think if a boy touches your hand during
Yes,
that time, then you're going to have a baby. Like that's a lot.
definitely. Yes.
On like the other scale though, There is a lot of misinformation going around about like if you have sex on your period, you can't get pregnant, but that obviously isn't true. And there was a period of time where I would be talking to my friends and like people would bring that up, and like I think there is a lot of, I guess, myths or like misinformation about periods being linked to, like, they are obviously linked, but like periods and pregnancies. There's a lot of fake stories about that, and it feeds into the paranoia.
There's so many myths around periods anyway. I feel like we should do one of these just about myths. So because there's so many of them. Right then, I think we're gonna have to call it there, but so I'm gonna stop recording.